Good evening, and welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, you've chosen a particular night to arrive. We're going into the deep dark tonight, all the way down to the place that has no sun, no seasons, no mercy of morning. And if you've been here before, then you already know how this goes. Get comfortable, let the room go quiet, and tell me, are you in bed already? Or are you somewhere else right now? A couch, a train, headphones in while the city does whatever cities do at this hour? Drop it in the comments. I always read them. Tonight, we're talking about Hades, and I know what you're thinking. You think you know this story. The kidnapping, the pomegranate, Cerberus at the gate. You've heard the name used as a synonym for hell. You've seen the blue-haired Disney version. You probably didn't think there was anything left. But here is the thing about Hades. The actual Hades, the ancient one, the one who existed before the Romans tidied him up and before the Christians needed a devil. He is not what anyone told you he was. He is stranger than that, more patient, more necessary, and in certain ways, more terrifying precisely because he holds so still. So let's go back, all the way back. Before there was a god named Hades, before there was even a place called the Underworld, before any of that, there was the beginning. And the beginning, as it always does, starts with the dark. In the oldest Greek cosmological accounts, the ones that predate even the Olympian myths, before anything had a name or a shape, there was chaos. The word has misled us for centuries. We hear it, and we imagine noise, disorder, catastrophe. But the Greek chaos was something stranger. It was the first yawning gap, the great void, the empty interval between what does not yet exist and what has not yet been thought. It was not violent, it was not loud, it was simply open, waiting. From chaos came Erebus, the primordial darkness, and Nyx, the night. These are not gods in the way we mean gods. They are more like conditions, qualities of the universe before the universe had settled on what it wanted to be. Erebus is the darkness you feel at the bottom of a well, the dark that has weight and temperature. Nyx is the darkness that moves, that wraps, that has a direction. Together, they produced ether, the upper air, and Hemera, the day, light born from darkness, which is either the oldest truth or the oldest paradox. I've never been sure which. Gaia, the earth, came next, or came simultaneously. The sources disagree, and there is something honest about that disagreement, as though even the ancient tellers understood that asking which came first, earth or chaos, matter or void, was the kind of question that didn't reward a clean answer. Gaia arrived solid and enormous and self-sufficient. She didn't need a consort to begin her work. From herself, she produced Uranos, the sky, to cover her, and Pontus, the sea, to border her. Then Gaia and Uranos lay together, and what was born from that union was not gentle. The first children of Gaia and Uranos were the Titans, 12 of them, 6 male, 6 female, vast and elemental and ancient in a way that the later Olympians, for all their power, never quite managed to be. Oceanus, who encircled the world as a river. Hyperion, who drove the sun's first fire across the early sky. Mnemosyne, memory herself, without whom nothing that happened could be said to have happened at all. Themis, order, not law as humans later wrote it, but the deeper law, the one that precedes courts and temples, the law that says fire burns upward and water falls down. Coeus and Phoebe, whose children and grandchildren would include Apollo and Artemis, Kronos, the youngest, who would become in time the most significant. But before the Titans, there were others. Uranus also fathered on Gaia, unwillingly for her, the Cyclopes, 3 one-eyed giants whose craft would later forge the weapons that unmade him, and the Hecatoncheires, 300-handed creatures of such overwhelming force and size that to look at them, the accounts agree, was to understand that the universe had overreached itself, had produced something the fabric of the world was not structured to contain. Uranus looked at the Hecatoncheires and felt something that a being of his magnitude should not have been capable of: fear. He pushed them back into Gaia, back into the earth herself, refusing to let them be born properly into the light. And Gaia, who had carried them and felt them moving inside her, began to understand that her husband was also her captor. The pain she felt was not only physical, it was the particular suffering of a mother who has learned that the being she trusted with her children has become their enemy. This is where it starts, really. Not with the gods we know by name, but here, in the pain of an earth that cannot give birth, in the cruelty of a sky that fears what it has made. Everything that follows, every war, every usurpation, every god swallowed or chained or banished, flows downstream from this first wound. Gaia called her Titan children to her. She had made a great curved blade of grey flint, the first weapon ever fashioned, and she asked each of them to take it and do what needed to be done. One by one, they refused. The sky was their father. The task was enormous. The consequences were unknowable. Only Kronos, the youngest, said yes. What was Kronos in that moment? Hero or usurper? Liberator or the first in a long line of sons who repeat their father's crimes in a different key? The Greeks could hold all of these at once. That was one of the things they were very good at. The details of what happened next were sometimes left vague in polite tellings. But the essence is this: Kronos ambushed Uranus, castrated him, and hurled the severed pieces into the sea. From the foam that gathered around those pieces, Aphrodite was born, which is either beautiful or horrifying or both, depending on your threshold for the intersection of violence and beauty. Uranus, as he fell away into the permanent distance, spoke what might have been the first prophecy ever uttered, that one day Kronos would be overthrown by his own children, that what he had done to his father, his son would do to him. Kronos heard this, and Kronos, who was not stupid, decided to solve the problem simply. He swallowed his children. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, one by one, as they were born to Kronos and his consort Rhea. He swallowed them, not in malice, or not only, in fear, in the desperate logic of a king who has heard his own ending spoken aloud and has decided that the way to prevent an ending is to prevent the thing that ends you from ever drawing breath. The children were alive inside him. They were not dead. This detail matters, though it would be easy to pass over it. They were alive and whole and growing in the dark of their father's stomach in a prison that was also a kind of womb. Rhea. We should slow down here. At Rhea. She is the one the stories tend to pass quickly, using her only as the mechanism by which Zeus is saved. But she is more than that. She is the mother who has watched 5 children be swallowed, who has felt 5 times the birth, the brief flicker of a living child in her arms, and then the taking. 5 times she gave a child to her husband, and 5 times he ate it. What that did to her, the accounts don't quite say. They weren't interested mostly in that kind of interiority, but you can feel it in the edges of the myth. A fury that has nowhere to go and so goes underground, becomes strategic, becomes patient. When she was pregnant with the 6th child, she went to her parents, Gaia and Uranus, for counsel. They told her, go to Crete, give birth there, in secret, and when the child is born, wrap a stone in swaddling clothes and give that to Kronos in the child's place. She did exactly this. The child born in a cave on Crete, attended by nymphs and protected by the clash of weapons, so that his infant cries would not be heard. That child was Zeus, and Kronos swallowed the stone. He didn't know, or he didn't check. Whichever is true, tells you something about the kind of father he was. Zeus grew up in Crete, raised by nymphs and fed on honey and goat's milk, and the universe quietly reorganized itself around this fact. A child who should not exist, a generation that had been swallowed growing up in the wrong place. When Zeus was grown, and the sources differ on what grown means for a god, whether it was years or ages or simply the point at which he had become what he was supposed to be, he returned to his father's court. He had help, Metis, an oceanid of great cunning, who gave him an emetic, a drug to induce vomiting. He slipped it into Kronos' drink, and Kronos vomited. First came the stone, the false child, the wrapped deception, and then, one by one, the gods who had been swallowed: Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia. They emerged fully formed, already adult, already divine, already themselves. They had spent years, centuries, some undefined duration, in the stomach of their father in the dark, growing. Hades emerged from that darkness, already knowing something the others did not quite know yet. He had been the first swallowed, which meant the longest inside. Some accounts say that he was the oldest, born before Poseidon, before Hera, though the order shifts depending on the source, and this slippage of birth order is itself a kind of signal that the Greeks were working through something more than genealogy when they told this part. What is clear is that of all the Olympian children, Hades spent the most time in the prison of his father's body, in the dark, alone, but for the others who arrived after him, one by one. What does it do to a being, even a divine being, even an immortal, to grow up in darkness, to have the first formative portion of your existence be nothing but the interior of a place where there is no sky, no sea, no stone beneath your feet? No one in the myths ever asks Hades this question directly. He never answers it directly. He simply is, when he emerges, a god of enormous gravity, of stillness, of vast and quiet power, a being who does not raise his voice because he discovered very early that a raised voice is something you do when you are afraid. He was not afraid anymore. He had been in the deepest dark there was, and he had not dissolved. The war that followed, the Titanomachy, the 10-year conflict between the younger gods and the Titans, is one of the great set pieces of Greek myth, and we'll move through it with some deliberateness because it matters for understanding what Hades becomes. He was in it. He fought. He is not often depicted as a warrior god, and that reputation for stillness tends to make people forget that he was present for one of the most catastrophic conflicts the cosmos had yet seen. Before the war proper, Zeus made a decision. He went down to Tartarus, the deep abyss, the lowest place, below even the underworld, and he freed the Hecatonchires and the Cyclopes whom Ouranos had imprisoned there. The Cyclopes, in gratitude, gave gifts. To Zeus, the thunderbolt, the lightning, the weapon that would become the symbol of Olympian power. To Poseidon, the trident, the three-pronged weapon with which we could shatter stone and raise storms and split the earth. To Hades, the helmet of invisibility. Think about that for a moment. The three great brothers receiving their defining weapons before the defining war. One gets the storm, one gets the sea, one gets the ability to become unseen. You could read this as Hades drawing the short straw. And some people do. But there is another reading, one that feels truer the longer you sit with it. The helmet of invisibility is not a lesser weapon. It is a different kind of power. The thunderbolt announces itself, lights the sky, creates spectacle. The trident breaks the surface of things. But invisibility, the ability to be present without being perceived, to move through the world without leaving a visible mark on it, that is something else entirely. It is the power that belongs to the force that operates behind everything, unseen, ubiquitous, inevitable. The Titanomachy lasted 10 years, which is the Greek myth's way of saying it lasted long enough that the universe itself was changed by it. The fighting shook creation. The sea boiled. The earth cracked. Earthquakes and fire and the collision of immortal forces tore the landscape into something new. The Titans, older, more numerous, already established, had every advantage except that one. They had already had their time, and the universe, in its cold teleology, had decided that something different needed to rule now. Hades fought with the helmet. He moved through the war invisible, which means we do not have detailed accounts of his actions within it. And this is either a historical accident or a perfect metaphor. Take your pick. He was there. He was effective. When the Titans finally fell, cast into Tartarus, bound, sealed, it was in part because of a god who could not be seen or located. After the war, the three brothers divided the world. The tradition of the lot casting varies slightly, depending on who is telling it. Some say Zeus arranged it. Some say it was genuinely random. Some say the elder gods had a hand in the apportionment. But the result is the same. Zeus took the sky, the upper air, the domain of weather and light, and all the things that change and move. Poseidon took the sea, the encircling waters, the domain of depth and tide, and the power that wears stone down over time. The earth, they agreed, would be common ground, the domain of all three shared. And Hades took the underworld. Here is where the simple reading goes. Hades lost. He got the worst third, the gloomy realm, the sunless kingdom, the place nobody wants to go. But consider, Hades chose it, or chose it as much as any of them chose. And what the underworld is, what it actually is not a punishment. It is the place where everyone eventually goes. Zeus rules the sky, and the sky belongs to a portion of existence, a category of being. Poseidon rules the sea, and the sea is vast but bounded. Hades rules the realm where everything ends up. He rules the destination. He rules the inevitable. Time moves in only one direction, and all of it moves toward him. That is not a lesser power. That is the most total power imaginable, Hades descended. He began to build. We do not have, in the myths, a clean account of how the underworld was constructed. Whether it existed before Hades arrived and he simply took it over, or whether his presence shaped it into what it became. The sources aren't interested in this question in the way a modern writer might be. What we get instead are descriptions, a geography of the dead that is detailed enough to feel like someone had been there and come back and tried to explain it to people who hadn't. At the entrance, a great gate, Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who is not there to keep the living out, or not primarily, but to keep the dead in. The dead could enter, they could not leave. This is an underappreciated distinction. Beyond the gate, rivers. The Styx, the river of hatred, by which the gods swore their most binding oaths, which suggests that the deepest sanctity in the cosmos was located in the realm of death. To swear by the Styx was to put your divine nature on the line. Violating such an oath meant 10 years of the punishing sleep and another 10 of diminished standing among the gods. The power of that oath came from Hades' domain. The most serious promise a god could make was witnessed by the dead. The Acheron, the river of pain, the Cadence, lamentation, the Lethe, forgetting, from which the dead drank to release them from the weight of their living memories, and one more, the Mnemosyne, the river of memory, whose waters were offered to initiates in certain mystery cults as the path to a different kind of afterlife, one where you retained who you had been, to forget or to remember. This was, in the underworld's geography, a choice, or something like a choice. The territory of death, as Hades had organized it, was not a simple place of punishment or reward. It was a complex administrative landscape, a sorting mechanism, a place where human souls were weighed and distributed. The judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, Aeacus, were themselves once mortal kings, famous during their lives for the quality of their justice. This is striking. Hades didn't appoint gods to judge the dead. He appointed men who had already demonstrated something about fairness in the world of the living. The implication is that the justice of the underworld was not divine fiat, but something earned, tested, qualified for. The dead were sorted. The virtuous, or those who had been initiated into the mystery cults, which complicated the question of virtue considerably, went to the Elysian fields, a place of rest, of mild light, of peace that had no anxiety in it, because it would not be taken away. The ordinary, neither particularly virtuous nor particularly wicked, went to the Asphodel meadows, a grey and mild middle place, not suffering and not ecstasy, simply existence in its lowest register. The wicked, those who had specifically offended the gods, those who had committed crimes against the sacred order, went to Tartarus, where their punishments were designed with a kind of mythological specificity. Sisyphus and his boulder, Tantalus and the water that retreated, Ixion on his wheel. It is worth noting that most of the famous punishments in Tartarus were not for ordinary human wickedness. They were for violations of sacred law, for hubris against the gods, for betrayal of divine hospitality, for attempting to trick or cheat or defy the cosmic order. The punished in Hades' deepest places were not there because they were ordinary sinners. They were there because they had directly challenged the architecture of the universe. Hades watched over all of this, patient, still, thorough. His consort, Persephone, arrived. And this story, which everyone knows in outline, deserves to be told in full, because the outline is insufficient. Because what is usually told as a kidnapping is also a story about transformation, about how the goddess of spring flowers became the queen of the dead, and what that dual nature cost and gave her. Persephone, before she was Persephone of the Underworld, was Kore, the maiden. She was Demeter's daughter, and Demeter, goddess of grain, of harvest, of the entire cycle by which the earth fed human beings, had kept her close and bright. Kore grew up in perpetual spring, which is another way of saying she grew up in a world where nothing ended. Demeter's domain was the yielding earth, the growing thing, the cycle of fruit and harvest. But harvests require winters. Demeter kept winter from her daughter. One day, and the setting varies. Sometimes it is a meadow near Enna in Sicily, sometimes other locations. Kore was gathering flowers. The narcissus, some accounts say. A flower with a particular mythology attached to it. A flower associated with self-absorption and with the threshold between the living and the dead, which makes you wonder whether Kore was drawn to the dangerous flower by something she didn't yet know about herself. The earth opened. Hades came up in his chariot. He took her. The accounts that describe this as simply a violent abduction are correct in the facts and impoverished in the meaning. Hades did seize her. He did bring her to the underworld without her consent, without her mother's knowledge, without any formal agreement. And this should not be minimized. The abduction was real. The loss of choice was real. But something else is also true. Hades did not take Kore carelessly, the way some powerful god might take a mortal in a mythological universe full of divine assault. He had chosen her. He wanted her specifically, not as possession, but as partner. He wanted a queen. He wanted someone to rule beside him. The underworld, vast, permanent, necessary, had no one who could look at Hades with something like understanding. He ruled the final destination of every living thing. He needed a consort who understood transitions. And Persephone, this is the part the outline tends to skip, was the child of Demeter, goddess of the cycle of growth and death. She was already, by inheritance, connected to the principle of endings. The spring flowers she gathered were beautiful precisely because they were brief. Her mother's domain was the harvest, which is beauty that has to be cut down to be useful. Kore didn't know this about herself yet. She learned it in the dark. Demeter searched. When she discovered what had happened, it took time, and the delay is itself meaningful, the period in which the world did not know where its spring had gone. She raged. She abandoned her function. The grain stopped growing. The earth hardened. Animals grew thin. Human beings began to die, and with them, the sacrifices that sustained the gods. This is the leverage point of the Persephone myth, the hinge on which the entire cosmic order turned. Demeter's grief had the power to end the world, not through violence, not through war, simply through refusal. By withdrawing her care from the earth, she could starve everything, human beings, gods, the entire apparatus of Olympian civilization, into ruin. Zeus, caught between his brother and his sister, between the needs of the underworld and the needs of the earth's surface, mediated. Hermes was sent down to negotiate, and the deal struck Persephone would return to the upper world, but because she had eaten pomegranate seeds in the underworld, the number varies, 3, 6, 7, depending on the source, she was bound to return. 1/3 or 1/2 of the year in the underworld, the rest in the upper world with Demeter, the pomegranate. We cannot pass over this without stopping. There are 2 ways to read it. The first is the one most commonly told. Hades tricked her, gave her the fruit, knowing its binding power, ensuring she could never fully leave. In this reading, the pomegranate is a trap, and Persephone's consumption of it is the final act of the abduction. The second reading, Persephone ate the seeds willingly. She knew the rule. She had been there long enough to know the rules, and she chose, however partially, however mixed her choosing was, to bind herself, because she had become, in that time in the dark, something that the upper world couldn't entirely contain, because Kor, the maiden, the girl who gathered Narcissus flowers, had become Persephone, queen of the dead, and that transformation couldn't be undone by simply going home. When she returns to the surface each year, Demeter's joy restores the spring. When she descends again, Demeter's grief brings winter. This is the cosmological function of the myth, an explanation for why the world has seasons. But underneath that explanatory function is something stranger and more honest, a myth about a being who belongs in 2 places, who is neither fully of the living nor fully of the dead, who moves between these realms as the only one who can. Persephone is not Hades' victim in the end. She is his equal. She is the only being in the entire cosmos who travels freely between the worlds of the living and the dead, more freely, in fact, than Hades himself, who almost never leaves his realm. They rule together. This is something the popular accounts tend to underemphasize. The underworld was not Hades' alone. It was Hades and Persephone. She had her own throne, her own cult in certain city-states that predated and outlasted the Hades mythology. Some scholars believe she came first, that there was an ancient death goddess, a dark queen, and that the Hades mythology was layered on top of her, giving her a husband and a myth of origin. Whether or not this is historically true, it is thematically true. Persephone is not a decoration in the underworld. She is half its power. Now, let's talk about Orpheus. Because the story of Orpheus and Eurydice is, among other things, a story about the one human quality that nearly undid the entire structure of Hades' kingdom, and the one divine quality that ultimately held it together. Orpheus was the son of a muse, Calliope, muse of epic poetry, and some say Apollo fathered him, though the accounts differ. What is certain is that he was the greatest musician who ever lived, and this is not a metaphor. His playing didn't simply please the ear. It moved things. Animals followed him. Trees uprooted themselves to stand closer to the sound. Stones shifted. Rivers paused. He loved Eurydice. This is stated simply in the oldest versions, without much ornament, and that simplicity has its own kind of weight. He loved her. She was his, and she died on their wedding day, bitten by a serpent as she walked through a meadow, stepping badly, stepping wrongly, dying on the first day of a life that was supposed to have just begun. What do you do when you are the greatest musician who ever lived and you cannot play the song that brings your beloved back? You go where she went. Orpheus descended to the underworld while still alive. which was essentially impossible, and did it anyway by playing. The music parted the way. Cerberus, whose job was to prevent exactly this, let him pass, ears back, massive head tilted, held still by something the music was doing. The shades of the dead, who don't generally feel things anymore, felt something. The accounts say the judges of the dead wept, and the accounts do not say what it means for judges to weep, but it implies a softening of the administrative apparatus, a temporary suspension of the mechanism. He came before Hades and Persephone, and he played. What did he play? We don't know exactly. The versions that try to describe it reach for things like the full weight of grief made into sound, the specific texture of longing that belongs to new loss. He played Eurydice. He played the meadow and the serpent and the wedding and what it felt like to stand at the entrance to a life and have the door closed before he stepped through. He played all of this, and he played it directly at the king and queen of the dead, who had heard every lament that every mortal had ever uttered from the moment of the first human death. Persephone wept. Hades, and this is the detail that matters most, agreed. He gave Orpheus his wife back, with one condition: walk out ahead of her. Trust that she is following. Do not turn to look at her until you have both fully crossed into the upper world. There is a particular kind of faith being asked for here. Walk forward without proof, without confirmation, without the sight of the thing you love most. Trust that the promise of death is being honored. Trust the word of Hades. Orpheus walked. He walked through the underworld, and behind him he could hear, or he imagined he could hear, or he became terrified that he could not hear, footsteps. The accounts leave it slightly unclear whether Eurydice was there, whether she was following faithfully, whether there was any cause for doubt. Some say the path was silent, and the silence broke him. Some say there was a sound, and then a gap in the sound, and the gap was unbearable. At the threshold, almost out, almost free, the upper air almost in reach, he turned. She was there. She was right there. And at the moment he turned, whatever process had been holding her in the land of the living reversed. She was pulled back. The accounts describe her as stretching out her hands toward him, or speaking his name, or simply being pulled backward into the dark with an expression of profound sadness and without reproach. She did not blame him. She simply went. He lost her twice in 1 year. What does this story tell us about Hades? That he kept his word. The condition was clear. The condition was violated. Not out of cruelty. Hades released Eurydice, not because it was convenient or safe for his kingdom, but because the music had moved him. He showed mercy, and then he showed principle. He wasn't punishing Orpheus for looking back. He was simply holding the contract. The underworld operates on rules. The rules exist for reasons. Death is not a door you can wedge open. Orpheus returned to the surface world without her. He wandered, he played, he mourned for years or for the rest of his life, depending on the version. He refused the attentions of the women of Thrace, which offended them, and they tore him apart in a Dionysian frenzy. His head, still singing, floated down the river Hebrus to the sea. His shade descended to the underworld, where, the accounts agree, he was reunited with Eurydice. In death, finally. Hades didn't need to let that happen. He could have placed Orpheus's shade in the Asphodel meadows, or punished him for the twice-made transgression of descending while alive. He didn't. The reunion is recorded as simple fact in the ancient sources. No justification offered. I need to pause here. The thread of these stories is fraying slightly in my hands. There are so many heroes who went to the underworld, so many encounters with Hades that deserve their own weight. And I'm aware of moving too fast through some of them. Let me collect this a little. Let me lay out the full shape of what Hades meant before we go further. Sisyphus. Here is a man who was, by most accounts, the most cunning human who ever lived. King of Ephyra, which later became Corinth. He cheated merchants, neighbors, guests. He murdered travelers for sport, violating the sacred law of hospitality in a universe where that law was foundational. He was clever enough to have outsmarted death itself, which he did not once, but twice. The first time, when Thanatos, the god of death, came to collect him, Sisyphus somehow managed to put Thanatos in chains. This is told with varying levels of explanation. Sometimes Sisyphus lured him with a trick. Sometimes the method is left vague. But the result was catastrophic. With death himself imprisoned, no one died. The universe backed up. The dying couldn't die. Battlefields were full of mortally wounded soldiers who couldn't finish dying. The entire natural order of the world strained and groaned. Ares, of all gods, was the one who intervened. Not because he cared about Sisyphus, but because his battlefields were useless. He freed Thanatos. Death was restored. Sisyphus was collected. The second time, before he died, Sisyphus had instructed his wife not to perform the proper burial rites. He arrived in the underworld with no rites, no funeral, no proper sending off. He complained to Persephone about this, said it was a terrible injustice, that he should be allowed to return to the surface to properly scold his wife and ensure the rites were performed. And Persephone, either moved by the logic or by the audacity, or both, let him go. He didn't come back. He went home, resumed life, lived well into old age, and didn't return until Hermes was sent personally to drag him back. For this, for the chains on death, for the twice escape, for the gall of it. Sisyphus was given his punishment, a boulder, a hill. The boulder must be rolled to the top. When it reaches the top, it rolls back down. He rolls it up again, forever. What is interesting about this punishment, if you think about it carefully, is that it was designed not by a being of cruelty, but by a being of precision. The punishment fits the crime in the following way. Sisyphus spent his life trying to cheat endings, to prevent the rolling completion of things, to keep situations from resolving. His punishment is a situation that cannot resolve. He cheated closure. His eternity is endless, unreachable closure. Hades didn't rage, Hades thought. Tantalus was a king, son of Zeus in some accounts, who was granted the extraordinary privilege of dining with the gods. He repaid this by stealing ambrosia and nectar and taking it back to the mortal world. Then, in what the ancient tellers understood as an act of insane hubris, he invited the gods to dine with him and serve them as food his own son Pelops. Why? The accounts aren't clear. To test whether the gods were truly omniscient, some say. To see if he could get away with it. To make himself, in some perverse way, important. The gods, all but Demeter, who was distracted with her grief over Persephone, recognized what was in the pot and refused to eat, Pelops was restored. Tantalus was sent to Tartarus, where the water he stands in recedes whenever he bends to drink, and the fruit branches overhead pull back whenever he reaches to eat. Tantalize. The word has been in common use for thousands of years without most people knowing it comes from a king in Hades's punishment realm. But here, water and food in perpetual reach that perpetually withdraw. Tantalus fed the gods his son to demonstrate his power over them, to show that he could cook what they could not. His punishment is the permanent experience of the power he violated, the power of sustenance withheld. Every moment he is almost sustained. Every moment he is not. Again, this is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. This is an architecture of consequence. Ixion was a king who murdered his own father-in-law to avoid paying a bride price, which was, in the Greek moral universe, a violation of the most basic obligation of the kinship system. Zeus, in one of his stranger moments of compassion, purified Ixion of this crime and invited him to Olympus. Ixion responded by attempting to seduce Hera, which was either the most brazen act in the history of mortal impudence or the most comprehensive failure of gratitude on record. Zeus tested him with a cloud shaped like Hera. Ixion slept with the cloud. From this union came the centaurs. Ixion was struck with lightning, purified, and sent to Tartarus, where he is bound to a spinning, burning wheel, forever in motion, forever burning, forever finding himself in the same place he started. The wheel. Ixion tried to grasp what was above him, tried to reach through the hierarchy of gods and touch the wife of the King of Heaven. His punishment is permanent circular motion, always moving, never arriving, never getting anywhere. The definition of impunity permanently denied. Anyway, there is a pattern here, and I want to name it plainly before we move on. Hades does not improvise his punishments. They are fitted, they are specific, they have the quality of a mind that has seen what a soul did and has understood exactly what that soul needs to experience in order for justice to be fully expressed. This is not the justice of the Olympians, which was often thunderous and spectacular and aimed as much at demonstration as at fairness. This is something quieter, more exacting, more cold. Let's talk about Heracles, because Heracles went to the Underworld, actually went there, entered and returned more than once, and his encounters with Hades and with the nature of death are central to understanding what the Greeks thought death was for. Heracles was the son of Zeus and Alcmene, a mortal woman, which made him a demigod, divine enough to be capable of extraordinary things, mortal enough to be capable of dying. The circumstances of his birth were elaborate, even by Olympian standards. Zeus, wishing to spend a particularly long night with Alcmene, had Helios hold the sun back, stretching the night to 3 times its normal length. Hera, who had a deep and specific hatred for Zeus's mortal children, tried to prevent the birth by having Ilithyia, goddess of childbirth, hold her knees together, preventing Alcmene from giving birth. This was foiled. Heracles was born, and then the labors. 12 of them, famously, but the labor that concerns us directly is the 12th. Heracles was commanded to descend to the underworld and bring back Cerberus, alive, without using weapons. This is a remarkable request when you look at it closely. The previous 11 labors had involved killing things, the Nemean lion, the Hydra, or cleaning things, the Augean stables, or retrieving things from the living world. The 12th labor was to go to the place where everything ends and to take the guard dog of that place back to the surface, not by killing it, but by physical mastery alone. Heracles prepared. He was initiated at Eleusis into the Eleusinian mysteries, the major mystery cult of ancient Greece centered on Demeter and Persephone, which gave him, if not exactly permission to descend, then a ritual framework for approaching death without being destroyed by it. He descended. The underworld reacted to him. The dead, most of them, fled from the living man who had walked in. Blood and life in the land of shades is a disturbance, a rupture in the metaphysical weave. Two shades did not flee. Medusa, whose image even in death apparently retained some power of the Gorgon's gaze, and Meleager, the hero who had died in the Caledonian boar hunt, who spoke to Heracles calmly and asked him to marry his sister Deianira when he returned to the surface. Heracles agreed. This agreement, made in the land of the dead to a dead man, set in motion the chain of events that would eventually kill him. Hades, and this is one of the only moments in the myths where Hades is described as actively responding to a living intruder, stood his ground. Some accounts say Heracles wounded him with an arrow, and that the wound sent Hades to Olympus to be healed by Paean, the physician of the gods. This is extraordinary. The death of the god of death is impossible, but injury, even to the unkillable, apparently is not. Hades was wounded, healed, returned. He agreed to let Heracles take Cerberus, on one condition: no weapons. Heracles wrestled Cerberus with his bare hands. He held all three heads against his body and applied force until the dog submitted. He brought it to the surface, showed it to Eurystheus, who, the accounts agree, was so terrified he hid in a jar, and then brought it back. He returned it. He kept his side of the bargain. Hades got his dog back. The transaction was complete. What I find resonant about this story is not the feat of strength, but the terms. Hades, even when being imposed upon by a demigod in a way that no one had the right to impose upon him, set terms. He negotiated. He said, "If you want a thing from my kingdom, here is what it costs." He did not simply deny the request, though he could have. He did not rage, though the intrusion warranted it. He found the exchange rate for the impossible thing being asked, and he stated it clearly. Every soul, every hero, every god who entered the underworld, all of them encountered Hades eventually, and all of them encountered the same thing: a king who had given up nothing, not his dignity, not his power, not his precision, simply because his realm was dark. The living world feared death. Hades did not require that they fear him. He only required that they come. Psyche descended to the underworld, not as a god or a hero, but as a mortal woman, sent there by Aphrodite as an impossible task. Aphrodite, goddess of love, was incensed at her son Eros for taking a mortal bride. The girl Psyche, whose beauty had caused mortals to worship her instead of Aphrodite, drawing devotion away from the goddess. Aphrodite set Psyche a series of impossible labors. The final one: descend to the underworld, find Persephone, and bring back a box containing a portion of her beauty. Psyche was not a warrior. She was not a divine being, not an initiate of the mysteries. not armed with divine gifts. She was a mortal woman in love, sent into the most dangerous place in the cosmos. She received help, as all great mythological questers do, from unexpected sources. A tower gave her instructions, a coin for Charon, honeycakes for Cerberus. Above all, do not help anyone who asks for your help on the way. The underworld would offer her opportunities for compassion, a drowning man, a weaver needing assistance, and she must refuse all of them because the underworld was designed to be a trap for the living who had living instincts. A heart soft enough to help the suffering would never get back out. She descended. She found Persephone. She asked for the box. Persephone gave it. On the way back, she opened it. Of course she opened it. The myths know who we are. We always open the box. Inside the box was not beauty. It was Stygian sleep, not death, but the deep sleep of the dead, the numbness that belongs to shades. She collapsed. Eros, watching over her, came to her and woke her. The sleep went back into the box. Psyche completed the task. What Psyche's story adds to the underworld mythology is this: the realm of the dead can be traversed by love, not by power, not by music alone, not by strength, by love and by the willingness to follow instructions exactly even when the instructions defy your instincts for compassion. The underworld does not reward feeling for its own sake. It rewards feeling combined with discipline. Orpheus had the music. He lacked the discipline. Psyche had both, barely at the last moment. There is a version of the Hermes Psyche-Orpheus triangle, not a literal story, but a thematic one, where you start to see what the underworld myths collectively are trying to say, that love and death are not opposites. They are the same force moving in different directions. Love grasps forward toward the future. Death draws backward toward the permanent. The difference between tragedy and grace is whether you can hold both at once without letting one destroy the other. The Eleusinian mysteries. We have to talk about the mysteries, even though, and this is a place where the historian's usual confidence becomes something more like a shrug, we genuinely don't know what happened in them. The central rites were secret. Not secret in the modern sense of merely private. Secret in the sense that initiates swore oaths of non-disclosure, so serious that even famous Greeks like Alcibiades, when accused of parodying the mysteries, faced potentially capital charges. Whatever happened at Eleusis, the ancient Greeks considered it one of the most important and most protected things that existed. What we know, Eleusis was a sanctuary near Athens. The cult was centered on Demeter and Persephone. Initiates were purified, processed in a great procession from Athens to Eleusis, and then underwent something transformative, something that apparently altered how initiates understood death. The ancient sources who describe their experience without describing the rites itself use words like no longer afraid, like understanding something for the first time, like standing on the other side of a boundary. The mysteries were not about Hades directly. They were about the path through death, the Persephone path, the descent and return. But they operated with the full implicit weight of his domain. You went to Eleusis to prepare for your own underworld. You went to learn how to die. This is extraordinary from a modern perspective. We don't have a cultural equivalent. We have religions with afterlife theology, but we don't have an institution, whose explicit function is to help people rehearse dying, to reduce the terror of death through ritual encounter with its territory. The mysteries did this, and they worked. We have enough testimony from enough serious people across enough centuries to believe that they worked, that something at Eleusis produced a genuine shift in how people experienced mortality. Hades permitted this, or rather, the mythology of Hades's domain permitted this. The idea that Persephone moved between worlds meant the boundary between life and death was not absolute. The idea that the underworld had structure and rules meant it was not mere oblivion. The idea that the dead had experiences, that there was judgment, that there was differentiation, that the self persisted in some form, gave the mysteries their foundation. The ritual was possible because the mythology made it imaginable. The Dionysus connection, which often surprises people. Some scholars argue, and the argument is substantial, that Dionysus was in some formulations the same figure as the divine child of Persephone, born in the underworld, dismembered and reborn. The god of wine and ecstasy, and the boundary-dissolving experience of intoxication, has deep roots in the same chthonic soil as the underworld myths. The loss of self in Dionysian ecstasy and the loss of self in death were, in the ancient imagination, related states. Both involve the temporary dissolution of the individual boundary. Both were terrifying. Both were transformative. Hades sat at the center of all this, still permanent, the axis around which the cosmic question of mortality rotated. He was rarely propitiated. He had, and this is the fact that the ancient sources note with a consistency that suggests it was important to them, almost no cult centers of worship. Scattered exceptions, a temple at Elis, a few ritual sites, some connection to the mystery cult tradition. But he was not prayed to the way Zeus was, not appeased the way Poseidon was, not celebrated the way Apollo or Aphrodite were. People didn't sacrifice to Hades because people, by and large, did not want to call his attention. You did not want Hades thinking about you while you were still alive. The prayer was implied, let me not need you yet. And yet the grain itself, the wheat and barley and corn that fed the ancient world, grew from beneath the earth. The seed went down into the dark. The dark kept it, transformed it, sent it back upward, changed. Hades was the chthonic force beneath all agriculture. Demeter couldn't grow what she grew without the soil that was, ultimately, Hades's domain. Every loaf of bread had passed through the kingdom of the dead. There is a kind of thinking that says the things we most depend on are the things we least want to look at directly. The economies built on labor we'd rather not examine. The structures of comfort founded on materials we'd rather not trace. Hades is the ancient version of this truth. Every living thing depended on him. No one wanted to say so out loud. Hades was also called, and the etymology here is important, Pluton, which the Romans adopted as Pluto. Pluton means something close to the rich one, the wealthy lord, because the earth holds all the metals, all the ores, all the minerals that constitute wealth in the material world. Because the dead who return to the earth seed the soil with their nutrients, make the ground rich, complete the cycle that allows new growth. Because beneath the surface, In the literal and the figurative darkness, all wealth is stored. He is not the god of death. He is the god of what death makes possible. This distinction, which the ancient sources draw more clearly than we usually acknowledge, changes everything about him. Thanatos was the god of death, the gentle twin of Hypnos, sleep. Thanatos did the physical work of ending life. Hades received what death produced. He was the keeper of the after, not the agent of the ending. When people curse Hades for death, they are, mythologically speaking, blaming the wrong deity. Death is Thanatos. The underworld, the permanence, the processing of what death produces, that is Hades. He barely leaves his realm. The few occasions recorded in the myths when Hades appears on the surface or at Olympus tend to be extraordinary. The wounding by Heracles, an alleged love interest in the nymph Mintha, whom Persephone transformed into the mint plant. Perhaps the consultation over Zeus's various schemes. He does not participate in Olympian politics to any serious degree. He is not present at the Trojan War. He does not meddle in mortal lives in the way Zeus and Aphrodite and Hera do. He has a kingdom to run, and he runs it. Minthe. The mint plant story is told quickly in most sources, but it has a strange tenderness to it. Hades, supposedly, became enamored of a nymph called Minthe. Persephone discovered this, or Demeter discovered it on Persephone's behalf, and transformed Minthe into a plant, the mint herb, which grows near the surface of the earth, in damp places, in marginal terrain between the light and the dark. The story is usually told as Persephone's jealousy or Demeter's protective intervention. But there is another way to read it. The transformation was a kind of mercy. Minthe, a mortal nymph entangled with the king of the dead, would have been consumed by that entanglement. A mortal in the orbit of death tends toward death. She was turned into something that persisted near the boundary, not dead, not fully alive in the usual sense, but a living plant that filled the air with its sharp, clean smell, a scent associated in ancient ritual with both the dead and with freshness. If Persephone saved Minthe, she saved her into a form that was ambiguous, threshold dwelling, perpetually near the underworld without being inside it. Or it was jealousy. Both can be true. There's something about the way Hades loved, or the way the myths allow him to love, that feels different from the Olympian mode. Zeus's loves tend to be impulsive, conquering, ending in transformation or abandonment. Apollo's loves tend toward the obsessive and the oblique. Hades loved twice, in the recorded accounts, and both times with what looks like patience. Persephone he took without consent, but also with intent, with preparation, with a specific vision of partnership. Minthe, assuming the story is true, was an entanglement that was ended quickly, possibly before it fully became what it might have been. He is not a god who grasps mostly. The taking of Persephone is the exception, not the pattern. What he is, far more characteristically, is a god who waits. Everything comes to him. He has no need to chase. Now let us talk about the Trojan War, briefly, in the way that Hades is present in it without being present in it. The war produced 10 years of systematic death on a scale that the ancient world found almost incomprehensible. Heroes who were the finest specimens of the mortal race, Achilles, Hector, Patroclus, Ajax, all of them, processed steadily into the underworld for a decade. Hades received them all. The shades of Achilles and Hector, enemies in life, inhabited the same grey landscape of the Asphodel meadows. When Odysseus, in the Nicaea passage of the Odyssey, visits the land of the dead, he sees the shade of Achilles and asks him whether he is well, whether the honor paid to him in death compensates for what he suffered. Achilles says, no. He says he would rather be the lowest farm laborer in the living world, the most wretched man alive, than king of all the dead. Better to live badly than to be a shade, however dignified. This is usually read as a statement about the bleakness of the underworld, but it is also a statement about Achilles specifically, a hero who chose short glory over long life, who made the trade openly and clearly, and who, when confronted with the full weight of his choice in the place where choices cannot be revisited, felt the full cost of it. The underworld doesn't lie. Whatever you were in life, you were. Whatever you chose, you chose. The shades don't revise their history. They inhabit it permanently with perfect recall if they haven't drunk from the lethe. This is Hades' gift and his punishment simultaneously, the truth of who you were, held still forever. Odysseus in the Nicaea does not see Hades directly. He calls up the dead to the border of the underworld by pouring libations. Blood, the thing the dead crave, the life they no longer have. And they come, his mother, old comrades, prophets, enemies. Tiresias gives him the prophecy he descended to receive. His mother tells him the truth about how she died, of longing for him, not of plague or violence, but simply of the missing. He tries 3 times to embrace her shade. He cannot. She passes through his arms like smoke, the arms passing through smoke 3 times. This is one of the most purely grief-struck images in all of ancient literature, and it happened in Hades' territory, under Hades' rules. The dead cannot be held. The dead can be seen, can speak, can be consulted, but they cannot be held. The boundary between the living and the dead is porous to information and impermeable to touch. Hades made this rule, or the rule preceded Hades and he enforced it, or the rule and Hades were the same thing. At this depth of mythology, the distinctions dissolve. Let me try to say what Hades is as a figure in the abstract, what he actually represents when you stand back far enough to see the pattern. He is the principle of permanence in a cosmos otherwise defined by change. The sky changes, storms, clear days, seasons of sun and seasons of darkness. The sea changes, waves, tides, the slow geological reshaping of coastlines. The earth changes, crops grow and are cut, forests clear and regrow, cities rise and fall. Hades does not change. The underworld does not have seasons. The dead do not cycle back into something else. They accumulate. Every shade that enters is one more fixed point in the underworld's permanent record. He is also, and this is the part that the ancient philosophers found most interesting, the only major deity whose domain is self-evidently necessary. You could imagine a world without Zeus's storms, however less dramatic. You could imagine a world without Aphrodite's desire, however less inhabited. But you cannot imagine a living world without death. You cannot imagine a sustainable cosmos that produces life continuously without something to receive what life produces. The ecology of existence requires a terminus. Hades is that terminus. He is the thing that makes everything else possible by providing the destination that everything is moving toward. The Stoics, centuries after Homer, picked up this thread. The Platonic tradition picked it up even earlier. Plato, in the Phaedo, has Socrates argue that the philosopher is the person most prepared to die, not because the philosopher is morbid, but because philosophy is the practice of caring more about the permanent than the changing, the eternal than the temporal. In this reading, the philosopher's soul goes to Hades and is at home there in a way the ordinary soul cannot be. The permanent has always been the philosopher's real country. Hades, in this light, is not the enemy of the good life. He is the destination toward which the examined life is moving. But now I want to hold something else alongside this, something that sits a little uncomfortably next to the philosophy. There is a modern unease, a contemporary discomfort with the idea of a being who takes without consent, who decides with complete authority that a transition is going to happen and makes it happen regardless of what the transitioning party wants. Persephone didn't want to go. Eurydice didn't choose to die. The shade of Achilles, given a chance to speak his truth about the trade he made, regrets it. The ancient Greeks were not unaware of this tension. They built it into the mythology deliberately. Hades is not a sympathetic figure in the sense of being warm or approachable. He is a necessary one, which is different. The universe requires what he does. That requirement does not make it less terrible to the ones it happens to. The myth holds both. It does not resolve the tension by making Hades secretly kind. It also does not resolve it by making him simply cruel. He is the principle of the inevitable, made divine, given a face and a throne and a name. When the ancient sources call him the other Zeus, which they occasionally do, they mean the mirror Zeus, the Zeus of the permanent world, the Zeus of the realm where the laws that govern the living are completed and made final. Zeus's domain is full of exceptions, special cases, divine interference, the suspension of fate for a favored mortal. Hades' domain is the place where the special cases end. No exception here. No beloved child protected. No prophecy deferred indefinitely. No mortal spared, because a god has a preference. What happened, happened. What ends, ends. What is owed is paid. The myth of Aer, told at the end of Plato's Republic, is the most philosophically elaborate ancient account of the underworld and what happens in it. A man named Aer dies in battle, is laid out for burial, and returns to life on the pyre. He describes what he saw, the dead being judged, assigned their penalties or rewards, completing their time, and then, this is the part Plato was most interested in, being given a choice of a new life. They line up, they choose. Some choose wisely, knowing from their experience what truly matters. Some choose badly, drawn back to power, or wealth, or beauty, without having learned why those things had made them miserable before. Then they drink from the lethe, and they're born again. This is not the mainstream Greek view of the underworld. It draws heavily on Pythagorean ideas of metempsychosis, the transmigration of souls. Plato was doing philosophy, not reporting myth, but it shows what the underworld mythology was flexible enough to contain. Not just a destination for the dead, but a mechanism of transformation, a space for the soul to be processed. The descent, the judgment, the experience, the reascent. In this reading, Hades is not a god of endings, but of intervals. Not a terminus, but a waiting room. There is something almost not quite comforting, but stabilizing about this. The dead are not simply extinguished. They are somewhere. They are in a place with structure and rules, and a king who keeps order. The universe has not discarded them. It has received them. Anyway, the Romans received Hades as Pluto, tidied him considerably, and paired him more explicitly with wealth and agricultural bounty. The Pluto of Roman myth is slightly warmer than the Greek Hades, slightly more accessible, slightly less cold. He married Proserpina with somewhat less violence in the Roman tellings, or the violence was contextualized differently. Jupiter intervened more quickly. The Roman version kept the function but softened the edge. The Christians who came after found in Hades a useful template for hell, but made a crucial alteration. Hell, in the Christian sense, is morally condemned. Hades was never condemned. The Greek underworld was not a punishment for the human condition. It was the human condition's destination. Going to Hades was as natural as dying, which is to say it was inevitable, which is to say it was not a judgment. The Christian hell, by contrast, is a place you deserve. The Greek underworld is a place you go. This difference is enormous. The Greek relationship with death, mediated through the mythology of Hades, was not primarily about moral anxiety. It was about ontological anxiety, the anxiety of the self that knows it will end. The mysteries address this. The philosophy address this. The myths address this. They addressed it by giving death a face, a name, a geography, a set of rules. The unknown is terrifying. The known, even the terrible known, is manageable. Hades, as a figure, survived the official death of the religion that produced him. He survived it in language. Hades, Tartarus, Elysian, Lethe, all still in common use. He survived in literature, in the Inferno, where Dante borrowed the geography and the population of the classical underworld and dressed it in Christian theology. He survived in psychology, the Jungian tradition found in the underworld myth, a template for the unconscious, the deep dark below the surface of the ego where the dead things live, the resolved experiences, the old selves, the history that formed you and then went down. The descent to the underworld is the descent into the unconscious. The guide, Hermes, Virgil, the anima, leads you down. What you find there is permanent. What you bring back is transformed. He survived in every story we tell about death and what comes after, every tradition that insists the dead are somewhere, every culture that speaks to its ancestors as though they can hear. The insistence that the dead persist, that they don't simply stop. This is Hades's oldest claim. Not the punishment, not the pomegranate, not the god of gloom. The claim that death is not nothing, that the universe receives what life produces, that there is somewhere to go. The bronze turns black and the bronze is still there. That is a terrible fact and also a consoling one. The myths pass down through time and lose details and gain interpretations and lose interpretations and gain details, and what reaches us now is already several translations removed from whatever original forms these stories had, oral and varied, and sung by people who believe them in a way we cannot quite replicate. We receive them as literature, as metaphor, as the records of a civilization's attempt to think clearly about the hardest things. But something in them doesn't pass down. Something in them transmits. The figure of Hades, patient, permanent, precise, keeps appearing in every tradition that has a lord of the dead, a keeper of the final accounting, a being who receives without rage and distributes without caprice. He appears with different names and different iconographies and different theologies attached to him. The function is always the same. The universe produces death, and something has to hold it. Something has to stand in the dark and keep the account and not flinch. Hades. He's old enough to predate Zeus, in the sense that the principle he represents predates the principle Zeus represents. Order came before law. The permanent came before the declared. The fact of death preceded the story of the gods. He will outlast Zeus too. When the Olympian religion finally dimmed, when the temples went dark and the sacrifices stopped, and the last priest of Apollo closed the oracle at Delphi for the final time, what persisted longest was the underworld tradition. The mystery cults lasted centuries after mainstream Olympian practice had waned. The idea that the dead went somewhere, that a journey was undertaken, that a judgment was rendered, this outlasted the thunderbolt and the trident and the aegis, because those ideas don't belong to any one religion. They belong to the question that every conscious being eventually faces, which is, what happens when I stop? What happens to the I that has been here, thinking and seeing and reaching for things, when it can no longer do those things? Where does it go? Hades doesn't answer the question. He is the answer. Not the comfortable answer, not the warm answer, not the answer that tells you everything will be fine, but the honest answer. There is a place. It has structure. It has rules. What you were will be known and held. The universe does not throw things away. Good night. Wherever you are right now, the bed, the couch, the train, the quiet room, let the dark feel a little less empty. The dark has always had someone in it, patient, waiting, not unkind. Not unkind. He's there.